What are the biggest mistakes you want to avoid in your fantasy football draft, and what should you do instead? We're going to break it down for you. Welcome back, Fantasy Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris, and we're going to talk draft strategy, but more specifically, what not to do. These are some of the mistakes that we've seen made, and look, we've been guilty of some of them ourselves. We're not going to do these things in 2023, and neither should you. So let's start with the main position here, quarterback. You and I have both for a long time advocated late round quarterback. Don't reach on a quarterback. You don't need to have the top guy. And you know what? I think it might be time to throw that out the window. I think not having an elite quarterback might be a mistake.
I agree. I think one thing that we're starting to see from the fantasy community is they're starting to get sharper when it comes to these running quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, even guys like Patrick Mahomes. He runs a decent amount. Even last year, remember, I spent all offseason arguing about Jalen Hurts, and people were like, he can't throw the ball. And I said, it doesn't matter. It's fantasy. A lot of fantasy drafters have really sharpened up and caught on to the fact that, hey, these rushing quarterbacks with these incredibly high ceilings, and they're starting to go earlier and often. And if you end up waiting on quarterback, which used to be okay, you get stuck with these statues like Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, who just don't have the ceiling of those other guys. So, I'm not saying I'm going to take a quarterback in like the first or second round, but maybe even the third round. But certainly my goal in my drafts this year will be to come out with, at least a top 7 or 8 QB, if not a top 5 QB in as many drafts as I can.
Let's definitely clear that up. I'm not going early QB or anything like that. But I mean, you think, well, having Josh Allen, you don't have to have that guy, because you can wait a few rounds and get a quarterback who's pretty close. You'd rather have that advantage at running back or wide receiver. I don't think so. I think at this point, it's pretty clear. Guys like Josh Allen, yeah, he'll still be the quarterback one. Pat Mahomes, it doesn't even matter who he's throwing to. He's still going to put up elite numbers. And so I've always been the guy, and even last year, if you watch our mock drafts, we do all offseason long, I've always been like, I don't care if I'm the last guy to take a quarterback. I'll take whoever's there as the 12th guy left, and I'll be fine. Take a Matt Stafford, it'll be fine. Take a Tom Brady, no problem. Well, that was a problem this year because those guys just don't have that ceiling, like you said, of a running quarterback. There's always kind of a mid-round guy at quarterback that does break out, but good luck picking him. I don't want to wait too long on a quarterback is what I'm saying, because you definitely want somebody who has that ceiling, not just a pocket passer who doesn't. Now, talking about early draft strategy too, what about going RB early? I mean, I know you're a fan of zero RB draft strategy. What's your take on that going into next season?
From our early days, even when I was back with Rotoballer, you used to call me Mr. Zero RB. I would almost always go zero RB in drafts. And more recently, I started to go, more anchor RB. And sometimes I would even go double anchor RB. I'm questioning why. Why did I switch? Why did I stop doing zero RB? Because yes, you could say like, well, if you would have drafted CMC or Austin Eckler or Saquon Barkley, your anchor RB was great this year. Sure. But what if you drafted Dalvin Cook or Alvin Kamara or Jonathan Taylor or any other really first or second round running back? It wasn't great this year. And it's like, sure, if you hit on that early running back like Austin Eckler, great. But if you miss, you're climbing uphill all season long. And the other thing is, we see it every single year, and we're going to see it again this year. There will be Jerick McKinnons. There will be Jamal Williamses. There will be other guys I'm not even thinking about right now who were either not drafted or drafted late at the running back position who will help teams win championships. It happens every single year, and it will happen again this year. I'm going back to my roots. I'm going back to zero RB. I'm not going to feel like I have to take a running back early this year, unless, of course, if a running back falls, then go for it. But I'm not going to feel like I have to get a running back early anymore this year.
I know you might not believe me. I'm going zero RB in most of my drafts next year because, like you said, I was kind of stuck on the anchor RB thing. I feel like I need that one guy at running back that I can feel safe about in either round 1 or 2. And now I don't really care. I want those stud receivers who I don't have to worry about, and I'll be fine at running back later. Let's get to tight ends. I think that we all pulled the trigger way too early on a lot of tight ends who were not named Travis Kelce. Do you think it's a mistake to even try to get anybody else?
I really do. I mean, Kelce or bust. Kelce or bust for me this year. And look, I think Mark Andrews will bounce back. Maybe Kyle Pitts finally breaks out. Even Travis Kelce, for as good as he has been, I don't look at Travis Kelce, like a lot of people look at Travis Kelce and think, oh man, he wins leagues. I don't see it. Like in 2020, he won leagues. That was an incredible year. He was putting up 20 plus fantasy points, it seemed like, every single week. But even, in 2021 and even here in 2022, he had plenty of letdown games. He had a letdown game in week 17. Yes, he's great for a tight end, but he's not like, an elite top 1 or 2 wide receiver or top 1 or 2 running back. So for me, even if Andrews bounces back, or even if Kyle Pitts breaks out, or even if somebody like Goddard or Kittle or whatever, they're probably not going to be a true league winner at tight end. So for me, it's either Travis Kelce or just punt and grab guys late. Because look, this year you could have gotten like David Njoku off waivers. Gerald Everett was awesome for most of the season. Evan Engram was awesome late. You could have mixed around, mixed match tight ends and been okay at the position. For me, in 2023, it's Travis Kelce or bust at tight end.
There's so many tight ends that don't live up to expectations. And you can say, well, Pitts got hurt and whatever. He was terrible before that. Let's not forget. And it wasn't him. Look, it's not always about talent. It has to be the right situation. Kelce's in the right situation. There's so few tight ends that you can really count on going in there. And even the ones you like, you don't have to get that guy early. Like you said, it's not that big a difference at that position. So don't go too early on tight end. I'm not going to. And then I think it's a mistake also to not diversify your roster. Like if you have more than one league, which I highly recommend, you don't have to get your guy in every league because as we've seen, your guy is not always going to come through.
Yeah, and I definitely, was guilty of this with a couple guys like Najee Harris and Michael Pittman this year, guys I was really high on. It's good to be really high on people and lower on guys and all that, but also it's not so good to be tunnel vision like I have to get these guys. I think that's something I'm definitely gonna try to rectify in my own drafting in my own game this year. Yeah, I might really like this player, but you got to understand that every player has risk. Last year, what was everybody saying? Jonathan Taylor, the safest pick in all of fantasy football. Didn't really work out. It's not really worth it to just be stuck on your guys and be like, I have to get my guys. For sure, if there's a guy there you like, take him, but don't reach to just to get your guys.
It doesn't mean you can't have the same player more than once. Don't have to have him in every single league or every single time you're in round 2, and don't reach if you don't have to. There's one thing we know about fantasy football. You don't know what's going to happen. Even those safe picks, even those sure breakouts, doesn't always happen. Here's one thing I guarantee I will not fall for, and that is the preseason hype. All these beat writers, all these analysts, all these pundits, and of course, whoever's out there on Twitter putting these takes out there. I found that not only does it not give you the best information, but sometimes it turns out to be the opposite. So many players that were so hyped up turned out to be just massive busts.
I almost feel like if a guy is getting really, really, really hyped up, it almost makes me like not like them as much. You don't ever hear like them hyping up, Justin Jefferson in preseason or Austin Eckler in preseason. Why? Because those guys are good. They know that preseason doesn't matter. If a guy's getting hyped up in preseason and being used a ton, it's probably because the team isn't sure about him yet and they're trying to get a good look at him. Yeah, every now and then it works out, but most of the times these preseason hypes don't.
No, not at all. In fact, honestly, I can think of players who were the most talked about, the most hyped up, turned out to be the biggest bust. I already mentioned Kyle Pitts. Gabe Davis, I mean, you've got to admit, just too much hype. A good player, but people thought he was going to be a league winner. And then a guy I heard all offseason, everyone's so happy to have so much, Allen Robinson. Oh, he's going to come back with the Rams. Perfect situation. He's looking great in camp. Yeah, I mean, I'm almost just going to shut off social media during draft season so I don't hear any of this hype. And look, this actually brings me to another point with Allen Robinson. People thought it didn't matter that he looked like he was done and washed the last couple of years in Chicago. He's going to bounce back. Well, guess what? It doesn't always happen. So I think counting on a comeback from some of these veteran players is a big mistake.
I agree. I fell for the Allen Robinson trap, not because of the preseason hype, but because I did think like he's still got it. He just needs a better situation. Maybe it's telling when a guy, has a fall off like we saw with Allen Robinson or like we've seen with Julio Jones the last couple of years. Remember, people got all excited when he signed in Tampa Bay. even though he had done nothing for 2 years. Maybe it's more about the player than the situation. You know, the NFL, where it stands for not for long, the cliff hits fast in the NFL. Not a lot of guys get to ride off gracefully into the sunset. Probably going to avoid guys who look like, you know, Brandon Cooks, I think, is probably the perfect example to me right now. It's going to be easy if Brandon Cooks goes to a better situation next year. It's going to be easy to say, oh, he was just stuck in Houston. Maybe he was just stuck in Houston, or maybe he's, you know, going to be 30 years old and just doesn't have it anymore. Not going to be drafting Brandon Cooks. I don't care where he ends up.
And speaking of Brandon Cooks and Houston, I think the final mistake we need to make sure to avoid, players that are on bad teams. And I'm talking about teams that we know are going to be bad going into the season, and we were definitely right. The Texans, there was no chance they were going to be good this year. The Falcons, I mean, come on, that offense. And then the Chicago Bears, just because a guy's the number one target or the starting running back or whatever on that team, you're probably better off with the number 2 or 3 guy on a better offense.
It's a good point, because I mean, you know, that was kind of the thing with behind Brandon Cooks, right? Like, well, he's the only receiver they really have. He's going to get such a huge target share, like number 2 wide receivers on other teams. Like, I guess Brandon Ayuk could be considered the number 2 there, or Devonta Smith in Philadelphia, definitely the number 2 there. They were way better picks than Brandon Cooks. They were way better producers than Brandon Cooks, because they're in way better offenses attached to better, you know, in better situations. So you don't always want to avoid the bad offense, of course, but I think especially for wide receivers, like pass catchers, I think running back, it doesn't matter quite as much, but for wide receivers, definitely going to be avoiding, you know, at least in the early rounds, going to be avoiding those bad offenses.
And you can tell going in, if the quarterback situation is shaky, if the offensive line is terrible, this is a team that just is always losing, it doesn't have high hopes going into the season, don't put too much hopes into any of their players. And look, my guy Jalen Waddle, a lot of people were worried about him because, oh, he's behind Tyreek Hill. Hill's going to get all the targets. I think he almost outproduced the entire Chicago Bear wide receiving core for the entire season by himself. Definitely not making that mistake again. Now that you know what not to do in your draft, let's talk about who you should pick if you're on the clock, number 1. We'll tell you right here in who should be the number 1 pick for 2023.